Hi, this is Rachel on Catalyst Ruth. Used to be on Yoga Angel 7 for this particular video that you found me on, Prince Dogstar. And you asked me some questions there that I better to answer over on this channel. So I'm going to pull it up, put on my glasses so I can read, and try to answer, because you asked some really great questions. I'm thinking about converting to Baha'i. Listening to your video, I cannot figure out why you felt so isolated or disconnected from your faith. Will you please explain it to me? I also notice that you seem to be more sad that you left your religion than happy. Please help me understand. Okay, so I'm sure that in the video, yeah, I probably seemed sad, which part of it has to do with that, you know, I had been in this faith for 18 years, and that it's taking a huge step. And it's one that I thought I would never take. You know, I had always thought of myself as living and dying as a Baha'i, being buried as a Baha'i, that all my kids would grow, you know, living as Baha'is their whole lives. So it's a huge shift of identity, and it changes, I guess, the center around which my life revolves, because it literally did dictate, not in a dogmatic way, but in a connected way. Everything I did and why I chose to do it was somehow interconnected with the faith. Okay, I also lived literally all around the world in many different communities, in the States and out of the States. And so, in a certain sort of a way, I was almost saying goodbye, but trying to not say goodbye to any of those friends, just kind of taking a sidestep and letting people know what was going on. And so that's part of, I think, some of the sadness that you might have seen. And also because, of course, I cried. But yeah, I'm definitely so much happier that it's not a part of my life now. I'll go into that maybe in another video, I don't know, because I'm going to just try to cut to something that, so you don't think that I'm conflicting of what I just said. So I talked about just a moment ago that, you know, it was how I felt interconnected with, but then you asked me, how did I feel so isolated? Okay, there's a couple of different ways about that that I'd want to answer. First is, I actually made a video called Baha'i Deculturalization, and I think I'm going to put that in the info box. That talks about some of the reasons of why I felt isolated. Then it has to do with some other ways in which communities are run. Now, just to give you a basic idea, I've lived in communities that were incredibly small. I've lived in communities that were very large and spread out, populations of either incredibly large or incredibly small. I've lived in places where my family was the only Baha'i family for, you know, even like 2 hours ride or so. I've lived in communities where people just would worship in their homes because that was what we had. We didn't have any kind of meeting house or something like that. There's a couple of things that happened for me having those experiences. One would happen on a personal level. People usually hearing my name would think I was Jewish, which I was born and raised Jewish. But then if I would say, but I'm not living as a Jew, I actually practice Baha'i faith, they would, of course, ask me what it was. And just having that sense of telling them what it was made me feel isolated, just because I would have to explain to them, because they had no familiarity, they had never heard of it. And instead of bringing me joy and delight to, you know, talk about the faith with them, it instead made me feel very crestfallen. Okay, that's the shortest answer I could give you. The other two answers are not so comfortable to say, but I apologize to every other Baha'i and every LSA that I've been in a community of, and not because I'm sorry to report back to you that this is what happened to me. I found that I was not able to discover any kind of systematic or even random program that coordinated Baha'is into the community to provide any kind of service at all. That in and of itself made me feel isolated, because it wasn't, oh, on the third Thursday of such and such of blah blah blah, we're all going to go to da 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 da. I lived in all these communities, right? There is one community that once a year, one day a year, for a short period of time would clean up a highway. And that was a service project. Everything else was centered around teaching or firesiding. At the one time when I started, it was all about firesides. Then when everything changed over to clusters, which is another thing I'm going to talk about that led to my feeling of being disconnected or isolated, as I call it. And especially because of Ruhi. If it hadn't been for Ruhi, I don't think it would have felt that completely estranged for me. And I had said this several times before. I don't know if you've gone through the Ruhi process or have read any of the books or been part of those study circles or anything like that. If I had come into the faith at the time when there was Ruhi, let alone the clusters, I never ever would have pursued the faith and would not have become a Baha'i. So the fact that I came to the Baha'i way before then, it was 93. The Aqdas hadn't even been translated into English yet. All of it hadn't. It certainly wasn't published as a book yet, you know. You had to do all your own reading. Now that it's that systematic Ruhi study, I'm not saying it's like all done for you or something like that, but if I had come to the faith that way, I would have run away screaming. I would have never gone towards it at all. If you want me to talk more about why I have that experience with Ruhi, I can, but that's just the quickest answer. The other thing has to do with the clusters. I've lived in A clusters, B clusters, and C clusters, and I think it's kind of humorous that those A, B, and C, somehow Americans, I think, kind of have this idea in their mind that those A, B, and C are similar to grades that people have gotten in school or something. And so they think that the population that creates an A cluster is going to be like an A plus, we all work together, really, really well-oiled machine, okay? And it's not, it's just the number, right? So, or like the population, right? So I got a sense of feeling disconnected the bigger that they got, because they were quadranted off like that. Kind of like how, I guess, wards or stakes are in Mormons and parishes, and I don't even know what the other distinctions of how people orient churches. I don't even know. But, you know, these areas that as soon as these, like, human hands lines were drawn, they were, to me, so arbitrary and were just another reason to go, oh, if I'm going to go to a conference, it's going to be here rather than there because that's how the cluster is organized. Well, what if I'm more akin to people in this state that's beyond that line? It got to me, it felt regimented, if that makes any sense. There were things about it that, to me, it took away from a lot of what I thought of were like the deeper reasons, like the social deeper reasons that I ever had wanted to become a Baha'i, like all of the spiritual solutions to social problems kind of stuff. And there was this weird, like, I call it the difference between like the 70s hippie Baha'i and the like really deep, ardent, well-studied, often Persian Baha'i that's, got, 5 generations back and has been in prisons and, had to go over mountain ranges to get out of areas, and just really horrific stories of people with, trying to live their faith and all kinds of stuff. Oddly enough, okay, as Baha'u'llah was called the father of the poor, and as Abdu'l-Baha used to say when he would take, money to give to the poor, people would say, "Where are you going?" I remember this story from in the Americas. He'd say, "I'm going to go see my friends," and people would say, "Who are you talking about?" And he would be talking about the people in the street. The fact that those were the examples, especially of Abdu'l-Baha, that we were, he was a Baha'i, as to live as a Baha'i is to be as Abdu'l-Baha is. The fact that that was the standard, and the fact that I could never find inroads to where are we working with the poor, where and when are we working with people who can't read, women and children who don't have a home, or because they've separated from their husbands, or people who are really having a lot of problems with any kind of substance abuses, or physical illness, bringing meals to people, anything at all. It became, well, then you spearhead it. Okay, then calling people, does anybody want to come? No, 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 no. And then you are the person doing it. And then it's no longer the Baha'is are coming to do da da blah 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 blah. It's you, and you happen to be a Baha'i. Maybe you'll wear a Baha'i t-shirt while you're doing it alone. But that is what I found. And I'm sure that every Baha'i hearing this is going to be pulling their hair out, and that they have wonderful stories to tell you about amazing inroads that they made in their communities. I wished I had ever lived in a community where that kind of connection had happened. It never happened for me. I don't know. I think you might have asked one more question. Let me pull this up and see. I think that does all of those that you asked. But I'd like to do a part 2, and I want to talk about some books and give you some ideas of things to think about as a person who's considering, either studying the faith or joining it, or whatever you want to consider if you want to declare. So thanks a lot for asking those questions, and I hope that you'll stay for the second one, because I do have some good books for you to look at. Okay, God bless, and peace.